All right, my friends, so the idea of getting closer to your board is going to help you so much when you think about progressing in your ability to stabilize yourself, to have control, and to translate all these skills to whatever trick you may learn. There's many tricks where you don't really have to think about improving stability because you practice them so much, and so they feel second nature. And things like getting closer to your board are sometimes by default. Quick story, when I first learned double kickflips, all I cared about was getting the board to spin twice. As I started to iterate on these double kickflips and improve, try it off stairs, do it in different variations, I understood that something that didn't help me was staying tall when I landed. So in other words, if I do a trick and I land like this, it didn't really give me any stability when it came to just making sure I roll away. One of the many things that helped me was just thinking about getting closer to my board. Now, in a lot of other videos, I talk about staying centered over that lead foot, making sure you're opening up to the direction you're going, and as well as staying closer to your board. And so it might seem like they're three different things, but it's all connected. And so when I am referring to getting closer to your board, it's not just about getting low and squatting, but it includes making sure you're hinging at the hips, slight bend of the knees, so that you can allow yourself to get low and also recruit your whole body in a sense to make sure you can give yourself an efficient attempt in whatever trick you may be trying. So it's not necessarily like making sure you implement this is going to lead to control and comfort by default, but it sets you up in a better, to go towards that direction of improving your stability, improving your control. So just to demo this, I'm going to be doing 2 double kickflips, and you're going to see one where I land tall and then the other where I land a bit lower. The habit is ingrained where I can't even purposely land stiff. That one was a bit more of an example where I land closer to my board. I'm trying to get one where I land tall, stiff. Okay. That was a perfect example of what I mean by a lot of us, as we're learning tricks, we don't really think about getting closer to our board, but instead we end up landing tall like that and being okay with the land instead of iterating on it and actually learning how to implement that control and stability. And so how you want to go about implementing getting closer to your board, on top of hinging at the hips, slight bend of the knees, making sure your chest is falling over the lead foot and you're opening up to the direction you're going, because that's really going to anchor yourself over the board. On top of all that, you want to think about how you can start small. So maybe you don't try to start implementing or being intentional about this technique with a double kickflip or a trick you might be learning at the moment, like I did when I was first learning double kickflips. But you begin to think about how you can incorporate this concept into your ollies as you just cruise around with the little ollies. Even if you do no complies, think about getting lower, straight flip, right? Even if it's instinctual to stay up here, I want you to catch yourself down here, okay? So a lot of times we do tricks where we tic-tac. I want you to make sure you get closer to your board until you're like, I'm safe, and then you come up. I'm going to run through the straight 8 and explain what 8 of those flips I'm incorporating landing low and which ones I'm not. Sometimes it's all 8, other times it's 7, it's 5 out of 8. So we'll see how it is today, but I'm gonna rate them each from 1 to 10, and this should give you an idea of what you need to look for when you film yourself and you ask yourself if you're actually getting closer to your board. So here's the kickflip. Okay, that was 1. So far for the kickflip, I'm super comfortable just doing where I land tall, but we want the habit of getting closer to our board. Okay, the trick was awful, but the intention to get lower was 10 out of 10. So that's good. We're looking for the small wins. Heel flip. I think that was like an 8. Let's see this one. Okay. I like wanted to push myself out. I think because of that, that was an 8 as well. Okay. Nollie flip. I'm gonna say that was a 7. This one, that was, the intention was there. Another 8. Big flip. Oh, that one was good. That was 10. Nollie heel. Oh. Okay, that was like I think like a 9, honestly. Okay, that was like a 9.5. If we find ourselves trying to stand up tall prematurely, or find ourselves, you know, tic-tacking but on the way up, look, tic-tacking and then we're going up, instead of, you know, adjusting and staying low here so that we can catch ourselves. With this intention in mind, it means there's some room for improvement. Considering we want to stay centered over the lead foot, ideally you want to aim to get closer to your board, centered over that lead foot. So for ollie, lead foot is left, switch ollie, lead foot is right, nollie, same thing, center over the left, fakey ollie, center over the right, or get closer to the board over the right. That's super key when it comes to how to iterate in the right direction, because you can simply get closer to your board and find yourself slipping back or landing too far over your tail or your nose and tripping yourself forward. On top of landing, you know, slightly lean back or slightly lean forward. In order to progress this in the best way possible, I want to emphasize you don't want to start with tricks that are super difficult to iterate on. So in other words, a trick that was giving me trouble was the nollie heel flip. And so when it comes to iterating on that concept, I might want to make sure it's improved with a heel flip, kick flip, nollie flip before I attempt to improve it on the nollie heel, because I may not even have it in the other 3 tricks in that similar stance. So maybe I need to take a step back and just give myself the opportunity to actually progress with the other tricks, and then as I improve, take it with the nollie heel and up the difficulty level, the discomfort, so that I can get comfortable and little by little build that comfort as well. You don't want to set yourself up for failure so soon, where the hardest trick, or maybe even a trick you learned, is the one you're trying to implement this concept with, right? Now, this is ultimately up to you. You decide if you really want to spend the time in, but I've realized this is a game of patience. Let's say you want to improve this concept and apply it to the double kickflip. I can always improve this concept with just the kickflip, right? Before I go for the double kickflip, because I'm still building those habits that will translate, especially if you're doing this iteration over and over again with the kickflip itself. So on top of hinging at the hips, slight bend of the knees, centering your weight over the lead foot, opening up to the direction you're going, something that will help you land closer to your board starts with how you roll in. If you're rolling in a stiff manner, right, a stiff posture, it will be made so much more difficult to land closer to your board. So in the roll in, just like the roll away, you want to think about getting closer to your board. In other videos, I mentioned engagement when you're about to try the trick. This is what I'm referring to, where you're getting closer to your board, engaging, and even if it's horrible, it's so much easier to get closer to your board and iterate on the trick on the path to building that control, that stability, and that consistency that we're all looking for as we go about progressing in skateboarding. Engage, land. And this is not to say every trick needs to be landed, but when it comes to making sure we build that habit, we want to be super intentional and make sure that we can incorporate that on demand, so that when we skate other tricks, it's not something that we have to force, but it's something that's so much more intuitive. And as you take your skateboarding to obstacles, stairs, rails, whatever it may be, you are going to be set in a better position to land your tricks in a controlled manner. Landing in this manner where you're closer to your board is going to set you up in a better position to feel stable, and making sure it feels like you actually learned the trick instead of you got lucky and you landed it for the first time ever. You know, there's plenty of tricks that I've gone about landing so many times, and each time I land them, it feels like it's the first time ever. And so as I begin to incorporate this concept, I found that it starts to make sense. I start to get that click when I land tricks, and it just feels so much better as I progress with skateboarding, because I feel like I have a bit more control in a bit more say in how I want to skateboard, and I can express myself in a creative manner because of it. So many wins come from making sure we're closer to our board, but that's not an excuse to forget about staying centered over the lead foot, making sure we're engaging through the hips, slight bend of the knees, making sure that we're opening up to the direction we're going, and also rolling into the trick in a engaged manner. There's a lot more to this that have to be put together. So many wins come from making sure we're closer to our board, and the overall takeaway I want you to get is that it needs to be an integrated approach with other concepts like staying centered over that lead foot, making sure you're engaged, using the hips and knees to get closer, opening up to the direction you're going, as well as rolling into the trick in a engaged manner as well. So integrate your approach to landing tricks so that you feel like you actually learned them. So you feel like you actually learned them instead of landing them ever so often and feeling like you got lucky every time. Have more control in your skateboarding, and make sure you're incorporating this concept of getting closer to your board when you're rolling in, as you do the trick, and as you roll away. If you're interested in coaching or lessons, make sure to hit me up at profe.carlos on Instagram, profe.carloss. If you find yourself watching a lot of these videos, you might want to check the memberships where we go live for members specifically and answer their questions. Those lives give me the opportunity to get back to you sooner than later. Check out the lives, check out the memberships, Instagram, profe.carlos, and I'll see you in the next videos. Appreciate your comments. Thank you for your questions, and we will get back to you ASAP with another video.